Recent labor force data shows a worrying trend in the Bahamas. Between late 2024 and early 2025, unemployment jumped from 7.2% to 10.8%. Here to discuss what this means is Rupert Pinder, our good friend and economist here. Good morning and welcome to Bahamas at Sunrise.
Good morning.
That's worrying, isn't it?
Well, and to be honest with you, I mean, I'm a little less concerned about in terms of what the numbers are. The problem that we have in the country is really what is known in terms of structural unemployment. Really, and I think some persons have alluded to it in the press, and that is in terms of a skills gap. So what you have here is that you would see that despite the fact that there are a strong demand for vacancies, etc., you see it all the time, but yet there's a surplus in terms of the number of persons who don't have the skills to match those jobs. And so what you have, in effect, what economists refer to as structural unemployment. It's not unique to the Bahamas, by the way. I mean, this is a systemic problem that you find in a lot of developing countries.
And how do other developing countries typically handle structural unemployment issues?
Excellent question, and I think one of it has to be in terms of by way of a policy response, right? And one of the things here is that you have to be deliberate in terms of your policy itself. Has to be one that is in congruence with respect to job creation. And I think at every stage, there's a need in terms of reforms, and there's also the need to make the necessary pivot. And so you cannot have policies that are odds with respect to job creation.
And if you think about, we've been seeing initiatives in the papers. We've got a couple of persons on the show. We've had the National Training Agency, Bahamas Technical and Vocational Institute. It seems like there are some institutions who are trying to reach out into that skills gap and educate our young people, equip them with the skills that are needed. But as you're alluding to, there needs to be more than that. What are some of these policies you think that can help?
Again, it's a very good question, because it's not just a matter in terms of looking at the unemployment number and seeking to address the unemployment number. It has to be a holistic, it has to be a process, it has to be a systematic sort of approach. So to give you an example, our foreign direct investment policy must be geared towards, let's say, job creation. So, for example, and I know some persons perhaps, may have a different view. I can remember in the early 1990s when Atlantis got started. I don't think, in my view, and I stand to be correct, and I stand on what I say, I don't think over the last 2 or 3 decades we've had a project of that magnitude that has had the kind of impact within the domestic economy. I've spoken to persons who had worked at Atlantis, who were there as private contractors and have done extremely well for themselves. What we're finding today is that we have a lot of foreign direct investment, and then you go to some of the job sites, and it's like United Nations, right? And what we have to consider here is that, and that is not to say in terms of being naive, to say, well, okay, if a guy needs 300, 400 skilled persons, and you cannot find it within the local community, sure, you have to recruit that talent. But we need to incentivize those investors who are prepared to invest in developing our people. Because the reality of it here is that we give a lot by way of concessions, right? And those concessions are really in terms of foregone, in terms of taxes that can be used in terms of making investment in other areas. And we must be able, that must be reciprocated, and reciprocated to the extent to which that people are prepared to make the investment.
So we need to de-risk investment for the private sector so that some of these larger projects don't get stalled out. They go to completion, and then we can realize those benefits as a people, as citizens of this country. What about private companies and hiring young people, hiring Bahamians? Is there a way we can incentivize companies to do that?
Again, and I guess there's so many things, there's so many different facets to it that we can, and the show obviously won't allow for it in terms of the time. But again, and I think we also have to be mindful in terms of not providing a knee-jerk reaction. And a knee-jerk reaction, I've heard a lot of discussion about a livable wage or a minimum wage, increasing the minimum wage, etc. And granted, there are persons who obviously are struggling, etc., and so on and so forth. But the reality of it here is that we have to be deliberate, and we also have to take into account that these sort of measures hurt small businesses. Right? And it has to be a win-win proposition. In other words, increases in wages must be accompanied by overall increases in overall productivity. And I must put in this plug, because it is something that, and I've said in a number of forums, and that is this. This policy that we have And again, it's not an issue in terms, and I think we need to move away from the finger pointing in terms of who did what, et cetera, and so on and so forth. There has to be a national discussion, right? And it has to be void of all of the partisan sort of stuff because we are where we are. But the reality of it here is this is, I think, one of the things that is going to be our Achilles heel is allowing these cruise ships to develop private islands and divert traffic from your main ports of entry. Again, in my view, in my humble view, that is not a policy that is in congruence with respect to job creation.
I've seen the term underemployment. What does that mean exactly?
It's interesting. I'm not going to necessarily. Well, you know, I guess the best way to really describe it, you know, is really to the extent to which a person is gainfully employed or gainfully active, but really working below in terms of, generally it's really in terms of below their skills. But I've seen some things coming out recently, I think, in terms of the BNSI, which suggests something a little different, right? Because, you know, it seemingly suggests that, you know, to the extent to which a person, you know, is working a job and they cannot, and Bahamian actually cannot make ends meet, right? I think that's a little different in terms of, yeah, underperforming, et cetera. And
So
on.
it's not a case where I'm trained as a doctor, but I'm packing groceries. It's more so that the job that you have, that you work your 9 to 5, your 40-hour week, isn't providing what you need to survive in the current climate.
And again, you know, because there are a number of other things running through that. And one of the things is certainly in terms of inflationary pressure, right? And so what is happening here is that the cost of living itself has made it very difficult in some cases. The person's, you know, making it by essentially in terms of minimum wage. But the reality of it here is that you have to increase your level of productivity. And there's something I must say as well, and I think that we have to keep a watching brief on, and that is also in terms of the influence of AI, artificial intelligence, in terms of what that would mean in terms of the labor markets, particularly in the context of developing countries.
Well, hopefully it's one that helps the unemployment numbers and the underemployment and provides a solution that helps move the bar. Just before we go, if people want to find out more about you, maybe find out more about your viewpoints on this topic, how can they find you?
Well, I'm an assistant professor of economics at the University of the Bahamas. I teach both economics and statistics as well. So, well, I'm at UB. I don't think it's difficult to find me on the campus at UB.
Well, we appreciate your thoughts and your opinions on this very serious issue, and we'd like to bring you back on to continue the discussion. We know that we can talk about this all morning, but value your thoughts and your opinions on the show this morning. We look forward to having this discussion again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. You're watching Mamas at Sunrise. We'll be right back.